Terry Colath. I'm here today with Ray Boyce of Rosemont, and we're talking about Shakespeare. Ray has agreed to come back for another semester, and this time he's going to start us off with a brief overview of the life of William Shakespeare. Thanks for joining me, Ray.
Thanks. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I like the idea for people who are not, who have not been to your classes before, may not have spent time with William Shakespeare since back in the day.
Correct.
When we were studying him in school. And you've just come back from Oxford. You've
Correct.
just written a paper.
Just 4 nights ago.
Oh my gosh, and so we're going to get, you've really been looking at what you're going to talk about in this presentation.
Well, what we've been talking about here is that for newcomers especially, we want to say something about the context in which the plays occurred, the theatrical world in which they were produced and acted at the Globe Theatre in London. And we want to talk a little bit about the various aspects of theater management and the censorship of the day and life in the Elizabethan period, which is to me is as interesting as the plays themselves at times. So that's our goal with the first session.
And I think that's wonderful because we are all wrapped up in it when we're watching a play. And in these 3 sessions you're going to do for us, 1 a month throughout the semester, we're actually going to see a theatrical production, not a Broadway movie, but a film of a theatrical production. So we really are seeing kind of what it was like then. But to put it in perspective, that's going to be wonderful.
Well, I think it'd be very helpful to the students, and I think it's sort of a key to why did he write what he wrote, what were the pressures upon him, how competitive was the theatrical world at that time, what were the audiences like, what was their size, that kind of thing. So it's become over the years as interesting, very interesting dimension of theater going in the Elizabethan period as the plays themselves to me. So.
And I think it's also just fascinating when you think about how everything he writes resonates with us today. But what was going on? What were the, for instance, there were no female actors in these plays. I mean, that says a lot about somebody who could write words that resonate with us today in such vastly different times. It's almost like we need you to pull us into those times. And tell us.
What's amazing too, as a part of that, is that he wrote such amazing parts and dialogue for women, even though they were being played by the parts were being played by men, and we'll see some of that in at least one of the 3 plays that we've chosen for this year. Talk about relevance to one of the great secrets to his success over 400 plus years now is that the subject matter and the developments in the play are so relevant to what's happening today in our own society. For example, Measure for Measure, the last play that we will be looking at this semester, really it has so much to do with the women's movement today, with the Me Too movement, and assault on women, and I can't think of the proper word, but what's happened to women over been revealed over the last couple of years, and the play itself deals a lot with that. So that there are, one of the amazing things about the man as a writer is that the subject matter he chose is truly relevant today in enormous, really effective ways. So
such universal themes.
Correct.
Universal themes. And it's like, did he even know, or was he so focused on what was going on then?
Well, no one knows.
Yeah.
We know so little about him, why he chose his subjects, and what were the dynamics of his playwriting approach. But he certainly was very interested in history, the British history plays. He was very interested in tragedy, and he was affected by the Roman poets and writers that he studied as a young person in Stratford. He was very interested in comedy, and his comedies, which we studied the last semester, 3 of them, are so wonderful and appealing still today. And then finally, the romance plays, where in his latter years he wrote plays that were just much more expansive and global reaching, like The Tempest, looking forward to the future of the world, and the brave new world, as he puts it in the play.
Well, you told us a little bit about our November offering, Measure for Measure, Troilus and Cressida.
Well, Troilus and Cressida is not a play that's produced very often, and it's the story of that we all know something about. Helen of Troy was kidnapped by the Trojans, and the Greeks were battling over a siege was going on for years, trying to conquer the Trojans' armies and in Troy. And as that period of time went on, there was great unrest among the troops on both sides. Should they keep fighting because of this woman? Should they disband and go home? They've been there for so long. And so there's, to some extent, that story. And there's another sidebar story to it, a romance between Troilus and Cressida. Shakespeare based the play upon Chaucer's Troilus and Cressida, which is very much tells the same story. But of course, Shakespeare, as he always did, gave it some different twists and put it into iambic pentameter poetry and made it much more beautiful, even though many people, Chaucerians, think it's just fine the way it was in Chaucer's hand. But it again is relevant because of the themes that take place about the romance, but also about war and the utility of war and not utility, but the futility of war. And the play ends with many questions about that war and that process very unanswered. So.
More universal themes.
Correct.
October. Then in September, Antony and Cleopatra.
Well, everybody, I think from when you're very young, you've heard of Cleopatra and her alluring impact upon Caesar, and then Antony. This is not to be confused with Caesar and Cleopatra, which was written by George Bernard Shaw, but it's Antony and Cleopatra who, after the battles at Philippi, this tells the story of Antony going east and going to Egypt, and again falling under the spell of this very alluring woman, and what happens to him in the process. Back in Rome, he has to deal with political and military issues, and they don't all work out to his satisfaction, and then he returns, and both he and she have this very tragic ending to their lives and their love affair. So it's a very powerful, long debated play about the lives, and she as a person continues to mystify writers and the public in general, and all her impacts upon the males that she came with whom she came in contact.
Absolutely. And I love the way you're shaking up the format and doing it differently. Previous semesters we had a movie one night and discussion the next morning. Now we're having a movie one morning and a discussion the following morning.
This is an ongoing process trying to find the proper combination of ingredients to the program. So a lot of the class students in the class over the 5 years that we've been doing this really wanted to see more of the performances, and that's been fine with me. I prefer, though, to show as you indicated before, a film of an actual theatrical production. So the plays I have are either from the Globe in London or from the Royal Shakespeare Company at Stratford, where this year I went to see 2 plays when I was over at Oxford.
Wonderful. So you have this brief overview of William Shakespeare's life, and then you have the opportunity to watch the theatrical production on film one morning and a discussion with Ray Boyce of Rosemont, recently returned from Oxford, on the next morning. Hope you join us.